All views expressed are those of the speakers and their organizations, as this applies to IGDS as well.
I'm Dr. Angelique Nixon. I realized I didn't introduce myself, lecturer at the Institute for Gender and Development Studies. And one of the things that I think today really important for us to reflect on how sexual harassment continues to impact us, and what does it mean for us to think about it in this moment when globally people are speaking up and speaking out against sexual harassment. I was called this morning by the news to speak upon this issue, and one of the questions was, well, it seems that it's been increased. And I responded by saying, no, it's not increased, it's been happening all along. And what we now see is that there is an increased conversation and resistance and an empowerment, especially by women, to speak up and speak out against sexual harassment, especially when there are issues of power at play, which is where it gets very, very difficult. And so we're really pleased to have a dynamic group of people here to speak to you today, and I'll introduce each of them as they come up. First, I would really like to welcome Mrs. Frances Bain-Cumberbatch, who is here to speak with us first, and I will give a little bit about her. Okay. She's an attorney at law and as part of the group, corporate secretary and head of the legal department of the ANSA McAL group. Prior to joining the group, Frances worked at JD Sellier Co as an attorney at law. She gained invaluable practical knowledge and experience in several areas of law, including intellectual property, corporate, commercial, and industrial relations. She holds a BA double major in French and Spanish from the UWI, St. Augustine, and an LLB from the University of London, and a legal education certificate from Sir Hugh Wooding Law School. Please join me in welcoming Ms. Frances.
Good afternoon, everyone. Heads of departments of the departments at UE, deans of various faculties, members of the panel, and members of the audience. It is my pleasure to be here today. On Sunday afternoon, when I received a call from our group HR director asking me to speak at today's forum, I was filled with pride because she informed me that we were asked, or a representative of ANSA McAL was asked to speak, because we are one of only 2 companies in the entire country which has a formal written sexual harassment policy. Thank you. And this issue, and generally, the issue of violence against women has been something that has been close to my heart for many years. In fact, when I was finishing my first degree here at university, in double major in French and Spanish, my thesis was actually on violence against women. So I'm happy to return to my alma mater to speak on an area of violence against women, because make no mistake about it, sexual harassment is a form of violence, and it should not be tolerated in any form or fashion. So I was asked specifically to speak about ANSA McAL's policy, and I start off with showing you this little book. Every employee, once you are onboarded, you receive this little handbook, which in essence is a summary in short form of our key policies. I stress on key. So immediately an employee, and I believe an employee should be interested enough to read it, it's not that long, and I'm just going to read the short form policy of our sexual harassment policy in this employee manual. The group is committed to the maintenance of a work environment that is free of inappropriate and disrespectful conduct of a sexually harassing nature. Such acts, whether they be physical or verbal, will be treated as gross misconduct and subject to the sternest disciplinary action, including termination of employment. That, in a nutshell, is our policy that every person receives when they sign their employment contract. Okay? So taking you into a little bit more detail, we're going to get into what we have defined as being sexual harassment. We have defined sexual harassment as the following. Sexual harassment is the direct or indirect making of unwelcome sexual advances, requests for sexual favors, or verbal or physical conduct of a sexual nature. Sexual harassment does not include the natural interplay between sexes or amicable workplace relationships that are based on mutual consent. Sexual harassment may range from sexual innuendo to coerced sexual relations. It can be manifested in the following actions: verbal harassment or abuse, graphic commentaries about an individual's body, sexually explicit slurs, threats, jokes, or derogatory remarks, layering or making sexual gestures, suggestive or obscene letters, emails, text messages, notes, or invitations, displaying sexually suggestive objects or printed materials, physical conduct that includes unwelcome physical contact, touching, assaulting, impeding, or blocking movements, unwanted sexual advances or propositions demanding sexual attention with implied threats or rewards, offering employment benefits in exchange for sexual favors, or threatening reprisals after a negative response. It includes cases where submission to such conduct is an implied or explicit term or condition of an employee's performance of their duties. Submission to and rejection of advances becomes a basis for employment decisions affecting or facing the employee. It unreasonably interferes with the individual's work performance by creating an intimidating, hostile, or offensive work environment. There's also a time frame that we specify. The time frame is that it states that it must be lodged, complaints must be lodged within 6 months of the offense being committed. Now, this would be, of course, to encourage, because one of the things with sexual harassment, and I think it's very topical, so everybody knows this, the first question people ask is, why did she take so long? Why, after all these years, she's going to come and bring this up now when I'm going up for election, or when I'm doing this, or when I'm doing that? So it is an encouragement to the employee to make a prompt complaint about it, that we encourage it. It's something that they should not be ashamed of, and that it should be reported in a timely manner so that it can be dealt with. Now, a policy is nothing if there is no procedure for the employee to actually go about reporting it. So there's a procedure with regard for the line managers when something like this happens. A line manager, upon immediate receipt or knowledge of an act of harassment, must inform the sector HR manager within 1 working day. Line managers must then conduct an unbiased and confidential investigation into the case along with the sector HR manager. The investigation will start immediately and the findings shared with the employee. The maximum time to complete this step is within 7 working days. Again, you'll notice the time periods are short because we consider it a very serious offense, and therefore we want it dealt with expeditiously. If the alleged incident is found to be factual, line managers must consult with the sector HR manager in order to determine and carry out the appropriate corrective action. This corrective action may vary from counseling the guilty employee to other disciplinary action. In such cases, the managing director or general manager must also be informed before any corrective action is carried out. Corrective action must be initiated within 1 working day of the managing director and general manager's sign-off. It is critical in all cases that the employee who lodged the complaint is given prompt feedback on the conclusion of the investigation. If the employee remains unsatisfied, they may refer their complaint to the group human resource director. If the complaint is against the employee's line manager, the employee may raise the issue with the sector HR manager and/or their line manager's line manager. It is prohibited, I want to say again, it is prohibited to retaliate against any employee for filing a complaint or cooperating in an investigation. However, false allegations of sexual nature have serious effects on innocent employees and will also result in disciplinary action up until and including termination. Severe breach of this entire sexual harassment policy is cause for immediate termination. So, as you can tell, there are certain procedures that we have to follow, that line managers are expected to follow, but that we take the matter very seriously, and it is clearly stated in our policies that it can result in termination. Now, some may ask, what's the point of a policy? Many say that. But a policy is one of the key ways of letting employees know this is what their employer stands for. And this is a safe place to work when it comes to things of that nature. Why is it important for a company to have such policies and to ensure that sexual harassment is not something that is tolerated? Sexual harassment goes to the core of an individual. It undermines a human being's basic rights to have a safe place to work, to be respected. It goes to the fundamental, or I suppose sexual harassment continues to uphold, to a certain extent, a level of subordination of women in society. A policy of this nature recognizes the equality of women, not better than, not more important, not less than, equal to, and entitled to be safe when they come to work on a morning and not be harassed by fellow employees, their bosses, or anyone who is on the premises of the, permitted to be on the premises of the employer. So we at ANSA McAL are very proud that we have this policy. It has been in our policy for a long time, and we are very happy to be part of this process, part of this 16 days of activism. And the one thing I would like to say is that it should go beyond the 16 days of activism, because this is something, as Angelique said, has been happening all the time. There is now a greater awareness. Over the years, I have interviewed many persons to be employed at ANSA McAL or in other places. And not once has anyone asked, do you have a sexual harassment policy? And if so, where can I find it? Not one. This is a reflection of what we must do to raise the level of awareness and activism. When you go for a job, when your daughters go for jobs, your nieces, anyone you know who can be the subject of sexual harassment, one of the key things they should ask in an interview is, do you have a sexual harassment policy? Because that will raise the level of awareness for employers to understand that people consider this important, that it is an important issue. So not only will you be asking about salary, about pension, about health insurance, you're asking about sexual harassment policies. Because even though you're not planning for this to happen to you, it may happen. And the more employees or potential employees show that it is a matter of concern for them, your employers will respond. And hopefully, ANSA McAL will not just be one of two very soon, but hopefully many, many, many more employers will introduce a formal written policy on sexual harassment. Thank you.
Just as a matter of clarification, we invited ANSA McAL because it is one of the best practices models that we really wanted to highlight. I'm uncertain if, we're not certain that it's one of only two, but there may in fact be other sexual harassment policies. Okay, yeah, just for clarification that it was around the one of two best practices that we wanted to celebrate. So just to be right, to be clear, because I do believe there are other employers that have sexual harassment policies in place. But what we really highlighted in the policy that you that you highlighted as well, around zero tolerance, I think that is something really exemplary. Why policy matters, that policies, even, we can critique policies a lot, but having a policy at least gives you a place to begin the conversation, and it indicates the commitment of particular organizations to these issues, and really women's value in the workplace, and making sure that there's a space for that value, and raising awareness about sexual harassment. Once there is a policy in place, one can do the work around pushing that policy to make sure that it's implemented and making sure that it is utilized. And general safety, thank you for raising that point, that when sexual harassment happens, it undermines human rights, it undermines people's comfort, safety, and ability to even do their work, to do our work. And so thank you for raising our awareness about your policy, and more conversation to continue.